Hello and welcome back to Fifth Period, a film appreciation podcast hosted by a couple of media teachers who love everything movies. I'm Mr. Brown and with me is...
Mr. Whittle. Hello, everyone. Welcome back for our second episode of the podcast.
I am very, very excited. I haven't heard any feedback from anyone as of yet, but I've got my own notes.
I have heard some feedback from some students. Obviously, we didn't expect this to be something where we have the whole school listening after the first episode, but so far so good. With the notes I have received from students is nothing but rave reviews, so that's been great.
Yes, I can't exactly say I've been mobbed by fans out in the yard, but it is good that it is getting a pretty positive reception already.
Just a reminder that obviously the podcast is primarily for the students that are participating in our Film Appreciation Club, where on a weekly basis, we watch a film based on something that a student has chosen for us to watch, and then we're going to talk about it afterwards. So we are now into our second film for the year. We started off with Ferris Bueller's Day Off last week, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. It was really, really good. Unfortunately, Mr. Whittle couldn't join us for our second week at Film Club. But again, we had a really, really great reception. Lots of students coming along. We played a little bit of trivia at first, and then we got stuck into the film, and it was an absolute classic.
Yes, and when I did hear that would be the film that was screened at Film Club last week, that doesn't mean I didn't go and watch it at home myself so that I could be well informed in order to talk about it today.
One thing in particular that I'm really excited about, last week, Mr. Whittle and I actually watched the film together, and we were kind of talking through some different ideas as we were screening it. And so when it came to the podcast, while it was really great to kind of flesh some of them out, there was nothing new and surprising that we were bringing to the table. So it is really nice this time that we have kind of screened them separately, and all of the information that is coming out now is firsthand for both of us.
Absolutely. So I guess there's not too much else that we need to cap off, really. Without further ado, let's maybe talk about our film, yeah?
Yeah, and with that, as always, will come a spoiler warning. For anyone who hasn't seen The Truman Show, go back and check it out, and then return to the podcast for all the information that we're going to be going through, just in case we are ruining big plot details or twists and things within the film.
And of course, that spoiler warning is applicable to all films, but I do want to reiterate it for this film in particular, because as I was watching this film for what would probably be at least the 10th time that I've seen this film, and I'll talk about why later. But yeah, I did think how great it would be to be watching this film for the first time. This film in particular is one where you do not want to experience it having heard spoilers. Now, in this day and age, maybe it's inevitable that you do hear a little bit about what a film's about, but if you can go in watching this film for the first time, not knowing anything at all about it, really embrace that opportunity, because this film, more than many other films, has a lot of great surprises that come throughout the film.
Yeah, it definitely does. One thing in particular that I found really great about this film, and I guess it ties in quite neatly to what you were just saying, is that the director certainly doesn't treat the audience like idiots, hand-feeding them information. There's a lot of storytelling devices that come up early on in the film, and he doesn't quite piece together the entire narrative, but he gives you lots of clues and hints towards what's going on, so that you can appreciate that and get a bit of an understanding of where it's going.
Yeah, even the way that the film starts, and I'm sure, I'm just confirming we're good to jump in now to really breaking down the story. I think we've done all the overarching stuff. So yeah, the way the film starts with the talking heads, where it's got the characters being interviewed as if it's like a behind the scenes of the Truman Show. That in itself creates an air of mystery for us, the audience. Now, by the way, it's going to be very challenging to talk about this film and talk about us as an audience versus the audience of the Truman Show within the film. So we need some way of distinguishing that. We'll work it out as we go along. But yeah, so for us to not know what is being presented to us, especially if we weren't advised of what's in the film in the first place, then it comes up with Truman Burbank as himself. I'm like, wait a sec, that's Jim Carrey though. Now, the credits aren't for us though. Those credits are for the audience of the Truman Show. So
yeah, and that was something that I was reminded of on this viewing. It had been a little while since I'd seen it. and I had forgotten the actual format of the film, essentially because the film takes place inside the TV show. The credits for the film are the credits for the TV show. The music in the film is the music in the TV show. Even all of the camera shots that are used throughout the film are justifiably cameras that are used in the TV show. So we will kind of draw on a couple of those specific examples as we go through, but it's really interesting to watch it as an audience member of the film and be put in the same shoes as the audience members of that television show, The Truman Show.
For sure. One thing I like is that we kind of delve into it that way, and then we have the cameras that are exposing Truman himself to us. Now, we come to learn that these are cameras that are well placed within the Sea Haven land setting, and the way the camera work is presented to us, though, with those lenses, like the bordering lens, so that it looks like it's a hidden camera for some of them, but some of them aren't that way. It's a really great balance that's provided to us where we, the audience, get the narrative that we want, but it's through what's perceivably the cameras of the Truman Show.
The really important thing to kind of mention up front, as we said, we're not expecting anyone to be here who hasn't seen the film, but just a basic rundown of the premise. Truman has been born into this television show. Essentially, the company that runs The Truman Show purchased him from a mother that didn't want him, that gave him up at birth, and he has been growing up in Sea Haven, this kind of fake world, this dome where everything and everyone is working towards the television show. They're all actors, they're all sets, everyone is kind of working towards a script, and Truman is the only person that is growing up there thinking that he is living a regular life. He is literally the only true man within the world.
So, yeah, we're kind of giving away one of the Easter eggs that we could explore there, but the name itself is really something to be considerate of, that the fact that the filmmakers decided to call him True Man. He is the only one living a life of truth, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, and you do see that in a couple of the other characters as well. So the director of The Truman Show, the Ed Harris character in the film, is called Christoph. Clearly kind of a nod to Christ and the idea that he is sort of the overseer of this world. So Absolutely. Yeah, there's just some really great symbolism within the entire film. And we're going to draw on some very specific examples. But yeah, we'll jump back to what you were saying about camera. Now that we know the setup of the world and the fact that he's literally being filmed in every moment of his life, I found it particularly fun, on this screening to actually look out for the cameras. And they don't necessarily present as cameras, but throughout the film, you can see sort of black domes scattered throughout all of the set pieces and the props within the world, so that they can have these hidden cameras. And every time you do see a shot of the film, you go, oh yeah, they could have easily gotten that shot because I saw a camera on the neighbor's bin, or I saw it on that fence post, or one that I realized quite late in the film, even his the graduation ring that Truman wears kind of has that black dome. So yeah, it's safe to say that any opportunity that they could have to put a camera in, they've definitely taken it.
What I love is that we are put in a world with Truman believing that the world around him is the actual world, and it's not until that world comes literally crashing down around him that he commences this journey into becoming aware and then questioning everything. But it's that first light that comes from the ceiling that crashes down next to him when he's outside. So the world is falling down around him for him to come to that realization.
Yeah, I mean, we put out a spoiler warning, but we forgot to put out our pretentious warning. This is a film that is riddled with symbolism and, great filmmaking that we are going to geek out on. So hopefully you guys are as enthused, probably not as enthused, but hopefully you're excited about that too, because, yeah, I can't wait to delve into some of the really cool examples of that crop up throughout the film.
There is a lot throughout the film in terms of symbolism, absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that I found really interesting watching it through this time was kind of the morality aspect of it, and how sort of people get involved in the Truman Show. People born into that world too? Do they get cast halfway through Truman's life and then enter the world? And I was thinking about that for a lot of the characters that are really close to him. I know we find out Marlon, his best friend, they've been best friends since they were about 7 years old. So the idea that he did know the circumstances, he did know that he was going into a film, but he was a 7-year-old kid and he has spent 23 years or possibly more with Truman. So even though he is acting and he is working towards a script, there must inevitably be a bond that has formed between those two characters.
I have to point out, as you bring up that little tidbit of information where we are informed, and that comes from that moment where Marlon is saying, if everyone's in on it, I must be in on it too. We've known each other since we were 7. They reminisce as to, we went to school together, and something that happened where Marlon catches the flu or something like that. And Truman says to him, you were out of school for a month. And then in my head, like this is the first time I realized it after watching this film so many times. I'm like, that would have been done deliberately so that Marlon could have a holiday from being on the Truman Show. So there would have been things throughout the time that Marlon and Truman were together where they had to engineer opportunities for Marlon to have a break from being on the Truman Show. Yeah.
And it is, I mean, there's so much to look at. I could watch this film 100 times over and pick up something new every single time.
I feel like I have. Like, I don't know about you, but every time I watch this film, and I wanted to make this point, this is one of those rare films that every single time I've watched it, I've enjoyed it more than the previous time.
Yeah. I think that often that can be the case with films that are so laid with Easter eggs, with symbolism.
Yep.
Because there's so much to look out for, you almost get excited every time you find something new. One thing in particular that I noticed early on in the film, as Truman does start to realize what's going on, we start to see patterns, we start to see repetition. Because I knew that was coming up later in the film, I was sort of looking out for it early on. I was trying to kind of see, if everyone is just going through the motions, if the day does always repeat, I wonder when he goes to the newspaper stand, are we going to see all the same extras walking behind him? And sure enough, we absolutely do. And not only are we seeing the same extras, but we're seeing the same extras in the same clothes, going through the same patterns, the same motion. It's so clever how they layer moments like that in for us as an audience that you could never appreciate the first time you're watching the film because you don't know what you're looking out for. So it is that kind of information that's there just so that you can enjoy it the second, the third, the fourth time over.
And there's also things like the symbolism of the setting. And like when I say setting, I'm not just talking about Sea Haven as a place, but I'm also talking about the way that they've decided this world of Sea Haven is going to be represented to the audience within the film, where it's modern times, and we know that through, say, the Ford car he's driving, and some of the other technology that's shown, but there's still a hearkening back to an era of Americana 1950s and 60s, which, you know, is seen to be the golden era of American life. So they have said, even though this film was released in 1998, and we're meant to think it is kind of modern in its setting, especially because of the technology that's used and how they make the Truman Show, the costumes that they wear and even like that flashback to the high school and the way that that's only 20 years prior. So it's really the 70s. But they're dancing to music
like the 50s,
and they're dressing like they're in the 50s, right?
Yeah, it does look like a scene from Grease.
Exactly, right? So Sea Haven is made to kind of represent what they'd want America to be rather than what America is. And that's got a lot of kind of thematic ideas to unpack as well.
Yeah, it feels very, very wholesome.
Yes, wholesome's a great word. Yep.
And I think because everything is sort of catered to Truman and making his life great, it's really interesting to see that everyone is literally working in service to him, which is a very cool idea. And one that it's quite funny, like when you think about, he does realize things as the film goes on. And as soon as he realizes one thing, then he starts to notice everything else. But that he's gone 30 plus years in this world and not yet picked up on stuff previously. I mean, there's this great line where Christoph is being interviewed.
My favorite line as well. I know exactly what you're going to say.
Oh, well, by all means, if you know it word for word, I would love for you to jump in. I'd be
paraphrasing it, but it's something along the line. Like, this is at the midpoint of the film, by the way, guys. So where Christoph is being interviewed by Harry Shearer, the voice of Ned Flanders.
Not just Ned Flanders, but
quite a few Simpsons
Lenny,
characters.
Principal Skinner, Mr. Burns. It's great.
So halfway through the film, Christoph, the director of The Truman Show, gives a very rare interview for the audience of The Truman Show, and answers questions from callers. And he also just answers a bunch of general questions. But one of them was, the questions was, how have you been able to make Truman believe the world that he's been living in for so long? And Christoph's response is so insightful, and it's just this great quote that could be taken out of the film's context and just be kind of looked at more philosophically in general, which was, we believe the world in which we live in. Is that? Yeah. Look, I've screwed the quote.
I'm sure I would have butchered it far more than that. So no judgment from me. But it's really interesting as an idea because, I mean, it's the same as language. If you grow up learning a certain language, then that's the language you speak. So if he's not exposed to anything different than the world that's presented in front of him, why would he know any different? And I like early on how so much is clearly catered to him. So when the sky does fall, when the light does crash down in front of him, then as soon as he's in the car, there's a radio report that's addressing it.
That's so much fun where they try and backpedal on all the mishaps. So the car report, and then the newspaper headline the next day after
the homeless.
Yes, the homeless, for sure.
Even when he goes into the building next to his office building and he tries to go in the elevator and it's clearly the end of the set and you can see like a little break room or a green room where people are having snacks and sitting down in chairs, and he's clearly walked into the real world, or where people are taking a break. And then the next day his wife just casually slips into conversation. Oh, there was a tragic elevator accident and the wall opened up, or whatever it is. I just love that by that point, when he's starting to get suspicious, doing that sort of stuff only makes it seem more strange and over the top.
Yeah. Something that really stood out to me, and I guess we need to point it out at some stage, is that the cutaways to the audience watching The Truman Show. So it doesn't happen immediately because the director of the film we're watching wanted to keep it at length for a little while, but eventually they start cutting to people watching the show, right? So there's the guys at the garage, there's the staff at the bar, which is called the Truman Bar or something like that, which is like a dedicated theme bar to the Truman Show.
Yeah, and when it cuts to people, there's all this like memorabilia of Truman. There's caps and pillows.
But there's a guy in the bath as well. There's the old ladies sitting on the. But the first cutaway is my favorite because it's the two guys in the garage, and it's when Truman and Meryl, his wife, are kind of canoodling, and then it goes to. They never show you anything anyway. Like, the wind blows and then the curtains move. They never show you anything. So it was just the inference that the guys are just so dismayed because they don't get to see anything more explicit than just like, some romantic. I just loved it so
great.
Much. Yeah.
And I mean, the entire film is so meta, but that's my favorite aspect of it when it makes meta commentary on things that the audience is saying, because we're thinking the same thing when we watch TV shows. And there's a lot of moments where you go, oh, yeah, they would do that in a TV show. One of my favorite kind of nods early on in the film is the return of his father. So when Truman was younger, they wrote his father off the show. So they end up pretending to drown him so that Truman will be traumatized by it and then never want to travel on the ocean, therefore never leaving Sea Haven. And his father actually sneaks back into the dome, and he is dressed as a homeless man. Perhaps he is a homeless man out in the real world because he lost his acting gig. But he sneaks in, and to me, it was such a reminder that television shows recast the same actors in roles all the time. And so even though it is revealed that he snuck in, I wouldn't put it past a show to have someone killed off in it and then bring them back as a homeless person in a later season. We see it all the time.
What I love is when the interviewer asks Christoph, how are you going to rationalize this to the audience? And Christoph goes, amnesia. And the guy goes, brilliant.
It's so good. It's like something that you'd see in The Bold and the Beautiful.
Yeah. Like amnesia is a great way to get it by. Whatever. I love it. We should also maybe point out in terms of like that whole idea around us being in the seat of the audience and then seeing people within the seat of the audience, that this is a very early representation of the idea of reality TV. Remember, this film came out in 1998. Things like Big Brother and like all those other reality TV shows were like quite a while after it, at least a couple of years or maybe a year or two after it. So in terms of that idea of exploring what it is to watch other people as a form of entertainment, this was kind of groundbreaking.
Yeah, and they find a really nice balance between showing like the reality of it, but also including a lot of tropes from narrative-based television as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of when Truman is thinking about a previous love interest that he's had, they show a flashback of it.
Yes.
And to me, that is just like when they have like a whole flashback or a clip show episode, and they show like flashback sequences or clips from other scenes. Like they do it in Friends, they do it in Seinfeld. And I love that the people at the bar that are watching, the guy that's actually running the bar says, "Oh, they're showing this again. Like we already have the best of."
The best of, yeah. Now, speaking about that flashback, that's probably one of my favorite things in terms of the construction of this film, in that you've got to really think about this, because the flashback shows Truman falling in love with Sylvia / Lauren. The character's name is Lauren on the Truman Show, but her name in real life is Sylvia.
And her name in real life is Natasha.
There you go. But
so meta.
The way that they show it, is through this flashback kind of montage. But you got to remember, when you actually watch it, she's doing stuff that is not what they wanted her to do. So the producers of the show, The Truman Show, would have reluctantly included her into the narrative construction of Truman and his life, even though she did stuff that they didn't want her to do. She still gets represented because they're like, it's inevitable. We know that Truman thinks back to her, so we can't not, because the audience is aware of it, we can't not have that shown in some way. So they'd be gritting their teeth as they press that play button on the flashback.
Well, I found that really, really interesting, because there's a difference between what they want in order to keep the Truman Show going and what gets them good ratings.
Yes.
So one moment that I love later on in the film is when Truman actually goes missing, and they just put up like the picture of him because they don't know what to show. And they're like, you have to put footage back on immediately. And Ed Harris's character says, this is the best ratings we've got. For years.
Yes, because it's the first time in it's the first time ever, I think, they've not had the footage showing. Like based on that counter that they're 10,000 days and running. So this is the first time they've not been able to show something.
Yeah, and I mean, it's because people root for him.
Yeah.
The fact that he wants to get out is exciting for them too, even though it does mean that the show that they watch and love would come to an end.
And with relevance to that point, just talking back to Sylvia, one of the most, my favorite symbolic things is her badge. How's it going to end? Now, that is like a generic kind of badge that's referring to, like, you know, thoughts of apocalypse when you're in like college and stuff like that. But it's got references to Truman as well. And then it can then be taken, I think actually for Sylvia, it was taken into the more specific context of how is the Truman Show going to end? And then we obviously see Sylvia later fighting for Truman to be freed of his cage. So I love that badge. I love what it represents, and like kind of gets you questioning the morality of Truman's circumstance.
Yeah, and I mean, you really empathize with Truman throughout the film. There's early on, because it's presented as so ridiculous and over the top, it's very kind of amusing and jovial. I feel like the very first time that I felt quite sympathetic towards him, it's just a really small moment, but it's the first time he makes a real attempt to escape, and he's sitting on the bus and everyone gets off the bus. Like, they have to pretend that the bus is broken down because they don't know what to do. They're not expecting him to try and make a break for it. And everyone just immediately goes, yep, okay, we'll get off the bus, because they know he can't go.
Yeah.
And so it's normal to them. and it just shows him sitting there by himself.
But also in that scene, the bus driver says to him, "I'm sorry, son." And that I love that. That's a beautiful piece of acting because the bus driver, as an actor within the scene, the world of Truman Show, is inferring that he feels sorry for Truman not being able to live the life he wants to. But all he can say is, "I'm sorry, son," because otherwise he'd be breaking character. But there's like an inference there that he does truly feel sorry for Truman not being able to escape.
Yeah, and I wonder how many of the characters within the world ever do feel like that. When they can see he's struggling, when they can see that he's upset, how they feel about the fact that it is all manufactured. I like early on when you do see him like trying to go on a boat or something like that. Even the guy behind the ticket booth for the boat leans out the window and watches him.
Yes.
It's like, because it's a TV show. He wants to see, is he going to do it? He's got this fear of water.
Yep.
But I just love how many things are kind of put in place as precautions to make sure he doesn't leave. So knowing that he's questioning what he's going to do and is he going to go to Fiji, the same morning he makes the call to ask about Fiji, his boss sends him to the pier, and then at the pier they have this boat that's sitting under the water to remind him of his trauma of the sunken boat. So it's just like there's so many things that come up and guilt trips from his mum and things that you know that they've done. It's like as soon as they hear this, oh, it's time to show him happy photos of the family to remind him of what he's got here in the town.
Lots of layers.
Yeah, but I love all those moments, and I love how the characters kind of justify it to themselves. So later on when they're looking for Truman, you hear his mum being like, he just has to hear my voice, then he'll come running.
Yeah.
And that's not her acting because he's not around. She literally thinks, well, I'm his support system. When he hears me, he'll come back to me. I'm his mother. Because she has raised him. But at the same time, she guilt trips him about the death of his father. She pretends to be sick so that he'll take care of her. Like, there's so many horrible things that all the characters do. And you go, but you are their friends. You are effectively their parent. Like, it's so interesting and layered.
It does really speak to the human condition and like what people believe in themselves. Like in the same scene that the mother character is saying that, Marlon has just taken this role of I'm in charge of finding Truman. And like somehow Marlon also knows the whole lay of the land with Sea Haven and like has these really kind of militaristic kind of approach to like, we'll go here and we'll find this. And, you know, he's like in direct contact with Christoph. Like, so he's Christoph's man on the ground for like hunting down Truman. So he's really invested, not just as an actor, but like as like someone who has to make sure the show keeps running because that's his life as well. Funnily enough, Meryl's nowhere. Is she like around when they're hunting Truman at that stage? Or
no,
is she...
because she's been written out of the show at that
That's
stage.
right,
Because she fears for her safety and then proclaims to the cameras
working under these
the conditions.
Yeah, like that scene's so good as well. Yeah, I don't know if we want to kind of talk about it, but for me, like Laura Linney, the actress who plays Meryl, Truman's wife, arguably the best on ground for me.
Oh, she's awesome. Her performance is fantastic. The fact that it's a performance in a performance and like he calls out that she's never loved him. She crossed the fingers at the wedding, that it's literally just been a job for her. But you can see, like, for me, she is the one that quite early on tips off, not what's going on, but presents almost like an eerie vibe because she is the one that so clearly presents advertisements in her regular day-to-day speech. And you see her turning to the camera, talking about like the new lawnmower or the new thing that slices and dices. Like it's so creepy because she's clearly doing that thing that you would do in an ad, but to see that from a person in real life is so absurd. And I love that they really make a point of it later on where he's like, what the hell are you talking about?
Who are you talking to?
So
that's the
good.
best. I love that. Yeah.
But yeah, on that note, can we please discuss the advertising because it is everywhere and it is so clever. Early on you flag it quite quickly when the twins push him up against the sign every day.
Every day.
And so there's always a poster behind him that's advertising something new. But one thing that I noticed was that the poster was for Kaiser Chicken.
Kaiser Chicken for the first one. Yep.
Yeah, and then later on, when he's talking to Marlon, he talks about how he was hailing chickens for Kaiser. And so it's like, this must be like a huge sponsor of theirs that always comes up.
Well, it's the same with the lawnmower that Meryl brings up. You should get one of those new rotaries or something like that, she says. And then like later on, that's what he's pushing around. Now, how did she go out and buy that for him? Like, or did like he just get convinced to buy it naturally? And then that company gets to advertise twice on. I love that, and I love the beer with Marlon drinking the beer.
Oh my god, so good! And he's like framed holding the beer up.
But like later on, he's framed like holding it correctly as well. Like he always holds it with the logo
facing
front. Yeah, it's very funny. Good. Yeah,
but yeah, I love that stuff, and I love that is all still consistently there once things go crazy.
Yes.
Like, even when the world is falling apart, they're like, don't forget to advertise. And so at times where you think, well, he's on to you, maybe pare it back a little bit or be a little bit more cautious about it. They are just so in line with their structure. My favorite one of those moments is when he's in the car and he's clocked who the three people are that are going around the block.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a cyclist and then there's a jogger and a lady with a pram or whatever it is. And he says it. He's like, this is what's going to happen. And the first two come, and then the third one doesn't. And you think, oh, maybe like they can always hear him. Maybe they've spoken through a headset. Don't go this time. And then it still comes, and you go, well, I feel like they're not trying at all, like to deceive him. They're so used to being able to get away with everything that when he actually does start kind of peeling back the layers, there's no real proper precautions in place to try and present things as normal.
Speaking of the scenes where he does like start coming to the realization, my favorite is when he is going to work and then he decides not to go to work. I think you'd probably know the scene I'm referring to. My favorite thing about this scene, and it's a very small part of it, is that prior to that, we have been presented Truman as part of the Truman Show. We, the audience of the film The Truman Show, are given something different at that point where we get music. So we get score that's added to say to us, the audience, not the audience of the show in the film. It's very hard to kind of have these layers going. But to have that inquisitive kind of tone to or mood to the scene, because Truman is starting to really realize this is the scene where he stops the bus and then stops the car and he's sitting at the bench and watching people as opposed to going to work and stuff. And then he ends up going to the elevator. So all of that scene, I adore that scene for its construction. The music's the main thing that kind of stands out, but it's also Carey's acting in it, where he like that look of slow realization coming to play, and then the way the cameras are used within that scene to say, where is he? He's not where he needs to be. Like you see the side mirror of the car moving.
Yes, anytime the cameras can't follow him and they're trying to catch up, I love that too. Yeah. So I'm very aware that I've said I love that a lot. It's just because I love the film a lot. It's really, really clever.
So that scene for me is probably one of the highlights in the film in terms of how it's delivering story without being overt. And really allowing us to feel what Truman's feeling as well. Yeah.
On the note of music coming in at that point, as I said, it had been a little while since I'd seen the film, and I obviously knew the cameras were showing us the cameras as they would in the world, but I was wondering about the score early on, and it does actually reveal later on that all of the music that we are hearing in the film is music that they are hearing on The Truman Show. And just another example of even when things are going crazy and not going right, they're still kind of making sure that it works to the advantage of the show.
Did you notice that they have like a conductor in the...
Yes, so good.
Like when they've got the footage of Truman just sleeping and like it shows Christoph touching his face on the big screen, but the conductor's off to the side playing this like beautiful like music. So yeah, they have like an in-house conductor giving us a live score basically, which like practically would be crazy, right? To have like someone, if it's a 24-hour show, to have someone playing music as required 24 hours a day. I assume they work in shifts, but yeah.
Yeah, well, you do see a couple of nods to that. Christoph in his PJs coming out and checking on things. So they are definitely working in shifts. But I guess if Christoph is the crazy eccentric artist that he's shown to be in the show, I can't imagine he ever leaves the screen for too much time.
Speaking about that, like just generalizing, like I love that the way this film is built gives a sense of practicality to like something like this could be pulled off. We know in reality it probably couldn't be because, if nothing else, it would probably be against the law. But
how'd you reckon?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it depends. In America, maybe, who knows? Yeah, like we as an audience of the film there's a believability to it, like because they talk about the camera positioning and how many cameras there are and how they managed to get Truman into the show, and then, like you said, the shift work and all that. So they do build a story and a world that we go, yeah, this could actually occur.
Well, I suppose it's the same thing that we were saying for Ferris Bueller last week. There is some suspended disbelief in that. Obviously, everything that happens in the film, you don't go, yeah, that could happen. But it's the idea that the general ideas, the way the characters do react to the situations that are occurring, all of that feels very real.
Mm-hmm.
And that's some of my favorite moments when you catch the characters and they're off guard and they don't know what's going on, like the bus driver, but particularly in the surgery scene, where he goes in to watch his wife do surgery, which she obviously can't do, nor can the head doctor that's in there. And so they're like, we'll just do an incision above the knee, and then they lift up the sheet and they're, very good, doctor. Yeah.
And the patient starts freaking out. Yeah, it's so good.
But yeah, I love all those moments. And the moments too, I mean, Truman's always genuine in his reaction because he's living in the real world. But the moments when he starts to almost lose his sanity a little bit, and just like the outbursts and things like that, when he goes to the travel agent and there's that great poster of the plane with the giant lightning bolt through it to discourage
him from going. Travel agency, that's so good.
And and he just he asks for the ticket and she's like, it'll be a month, and he's just a month and like yells it in her face. It's so funny. Those moments where you catch genuine surprise or shock from people is what really grounds the film, because you go, even if everything about the concept isn't believable, if you did have this concept, that is exactly how people would act in it.
For sure. I guess we could probably look to move on because we haven't really talked about the ending of the film as yet. And I feel like there's a lot that happens towards the end of the film that is really pivotal in terms of what the takeaway of the film is. So for me, obviously, how Christoph chooses to respond to Truman trying to get away, that's kind of really speaks to Christoph as a character.
You see a little bit of humanity in Christoph right towards the end. He's certainly not a sympathetic character. He's obviously got his career or the show at the forefront of his priorities, to the point where sometimes it doesn't look like he values Truman's life at all. And when he does feel that the show is being jeopardized, he is willing to sacrifice Truman, or he attempts to cause harm to him out of pure malice and gut reaction to, he's going to ruin the show, hit him with everything we got, show him how powerful the show is and that we control him, not the other way around. And then you get this lovely moment where he's watching Truman almost drown to death on the boat, and he calls it all off. And you kind of go, yeah, I mean, he's been watching this kid for 30 years. He saw this kid kind of go through all these pivotal moments in life. As disturbing as the relationship is, he is somewhat of a father figure to him. He would feel very close and connected to him. And the fact that right at the last minute, he can't bring harm to him is a really kind of beautiful moment.
Absolutely. I think for me, it's very hard to say one is influencing his actions and then the other. I think both his desire for the show to continue going on as he wants it to, but also the emotional bond he has with Truman, these are happening concurrently to the point where he becomes misinformed as to the appropriate action to take. So I think, you can't just say he's only doing this because he wants the show to go on. It's also because he doesn't want to lose Truman. So I think there's a mess of emotions and a mess of feelings that drive Christoph and his ill-informed actions. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, it's a really inspirational finish. I found myself lined up with you remember the character in the bath watching the Truman Show? I did ask myself, how long's he been in that bath? 30 years watching the show? I
thought when he gets so elated at the end and then he splashes his water around, I'm like, that remote control's not going to work for you anymore.
Yeah. What an unrealistic narrative for that one very specific reason. But no, when he's clutching onto that shower curtain and like screaming for Truman to go on, I genuinely felt like that was me when you're watching it. And that's why I really like all those cutbacks to the characters outside of the world. So they're characters too, but presented as audience members. I really liked that because they show more of them the later in the film it gets, because you as an audience member feel more as the film goes on. And so it tries to kind of mirror your reactions and you emote with them in support of Truman. It's really interesting.
What obviously then Truman, the boat comes back and like he's able to continue sailing on, and that collision with the outside world, the real world, his artificial world coming to a physical end, and the boat veering into the wall of the Sea Haven dome. The symbolism there is just huge. Like for him to be confronted with his cage almost. Like I love that. And then like, because what Truman does thereafter, his response as a human it's really shaped up to be something that you yourself would wonder, how would you respond in that situation? Like your whole world has been a lie in a sense, but has it been? Like, define a lie. Like, like that quote from Christoph was, which I still don't remember word for word. You believe the reality that you want to believe in, right? So he did believe that to be his reality up until he was told there's more.
Yeah, it's so interesting, that moment right at the end where he is on the stairs and Christoph confronts him and says, you don't want to go out there.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in the real world. This is what you know. This has all been for you. And he's absolutely right. Like we've spoke a lot about symbolism, but everything is literally for him. So much so that earlier on, when he's having a sad moment, it rains specifically on him.
Yes.
Like, it's so great. Obviously, they're justifying it as a tech malfunction, but what a great kind of nod to the fact that it is just him that they need the rain for, because he's the one having the emotional moment.
Yeah.
And one thing that I was super, super excited about spotting in my screening this time, at the moment where his dad gets taken away on the bus, you can see him kind of out of breath, standing in front of kind of like an archway that has something engraved in it in Latin.
Okay, I don't recall that.
Now, I don't speak Latin. I'm a man of many talents, but that is not one of those talents. And I wouldn't dare read out the phrase in the Latin because I'm sure I would butcher it. But I was like, that's important. I'm sure that means something really significant.
Yep.
So it's not uncommon for that to happen in films. You go, oh, I feel like that was supposed to symbolize something, and you look it up. But rarely do you get the chance to go, well, there's some words. Let me just look up what they mean in English. And the sign literally means all for one and one for all,
right,
as the translation.
Yep.
And it was just such a perfect way to represent his entire reality. They are all there working towards his enjoyment.
Yeah. Going back to that final scene as well, one of my favorite quotes is Truman responding to Christoph's trying to convince him to stay on, where you never had a camera inside my head. Now, that really speaks to how even though you can watch someone and their actions 24 hours a day because they're put on TV for you, you'll just, you think you know this person inside out. You never really know a person because you can't be inside their head. And that's the point that Truman's trying to make to Christoph, that it doesn't matter if you've watched me all this time. You don't know me enough to know my thoughts are. And I just love that point.
And I mean, that's so evident in the final act of the film in general. I mean, the fact that they can't keep up with him, the fact that the measures that they put in place to bring him back don't work. Even after 30 years of watching every single thing that he's done, they don't know what his true passions are. They don't know how he's going to react in a crisis. It's all a really, really interesting metaphor for that.
Yeah. I don't know if I've got too much else to talk about in terms of I mean, I do. Like this film, I could talk about this film for hours and hours on end, but I do feel like we've covered the majority of stuff that I wanted to talk about.
Yes, that is very true. We do have homes to get to. A lot of students don't think we have homes to get to. Teachers don't have lives. We sleep at the school.
We are technically, we're in the media classroom right now after school.
We are, yes. We're in media classroom unnamed at school unnamed.
Yes. So I guess we'll leave it there. Certainly, I'm really happy to get the opportunity to talk about this film. This film does stand out to me as one that has, like I said, many opportunities to just keep going back to it and getting more and more revealed to you. So really happy that we had a student select this film.
We did, yeah. And after last week's suggestion being one of my absolute favorites for Ferris Bueller, coming into this week, going with a student-suggested film and just remembering how much I love this film too and how much you can kind of get out of a rewatch of a particular film, it has got me really, really excited to see what future suggestions do come up. Remembering too that if you do have future suggestions for films, please do feel free to come and see us at school, post it on Google Classrooms, or if you are just a listener to the podcast, feel free to comment suggestions for films underneath.
Very much looking forward to seeing what the students come up with next.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be another film that we love to revisit, or it could be a film we haven't even seen before. So that's a really exciting potential idea for the future as well. I do have to do the obligatory remembering to like and subscribe and share all this around. That helps us, but it also helps you guys to stay up to date with any future podcasts that we will release. But in case we don't see you, good afternoon,
good evening,
and good night.